So, oh, your mic is going to need to be way closer to you.
Oh, I know.
Let's see here if this is
There we
actually
go.
on yet. I'm going to wait here. Wait until I see this. Okay, yep. All right, yep. There's a bit of a delay, but we are in fact live.
Yeah.
So, Jeremiah Bannister, it has been
It
a
is.
while since the
Yes.
internet has seen you alive.
I know. It's been almost, 2 years? Year and a
Yeah,
half?
something like that. And,
A long time.
whenever the news broke out that the SSPX announced new bishop consecrations for July 1st this year, I decided that I would invite you to drive all the way from your home to come down to my studio in Steubenville, Ohio. And
That's where I live now.
Yeah. So
I moved there. Yeah, in
surprise.
September. Yep.
So anyway, so okay, obviously the background of this is that the SSPX announced that they're going to be consecrating new bishops on July 1st. My thoughts on this topic have kind of developed since I guess the last time I addressed it was the trad recovery video. My thoughts have since kind of developed on this, so I'll just kind of like lay my cards on the table so you know where I'm coming from. I've become a bit of a liberal on this issue because I think that it's understandable why somebody would want to go to an SSPX chapel, especially during the pontificate of Pope Francis. There was lots of confusion. There was, especially from the 70s onward, there was rife with abuse. And some people, it almost might have felt something akin to you're just trying to cling on to anything that you can to cling to your faith, and not have your faith destroyed. So for the faithful that attend an SSPX chapel, I'm sympathetic. The clergy are a different story. So the culpability, I would say, for the clergy, for the priests, and especially the bishops, is a little bit higher. Now, I'm not going to pretend to say that I know all the arguments, but for the sake of this conversation, I'm going to do my best to, as fairly as I can, represent the SSPX side of this issue. Now
I'll do it as unfairly as I can.
Okay, yeah.
No.
Well, I'll try
No.
to be it as fair as as possible, and I am sure it's going to happen, and I encourage it. If there's any, of the faithful who attend an SSPX chapel, if you guys see me miss something or misrepresent or something like that, please correct it in the comments. Which I know I didn't need to say that. You're going to do it anyway. But I just do want to say that I 110% welcome that feedback because at the end of the day, I would just want to represent everybody fairly. And, that's the only way that we're going to get to the truth. So, but anyway, I'll hand it over to you for a bit.
Yeah, I've dealt with this issue for quite some time. I used to be a sedevacantist, and I kind of skipped over the society, to be quite frank. I went from diocesan Latin Mass. I was part of that first wave of people that following the motu proprio of Pope Benedict, that I was one of those that went around getting signatures in order to have our priest do it. We didn't have to,
right?
But he insisted that we do. He's a very diplomatic priest. He's been able to maintain a Latin Mass in 2 different parishes that he's been involved with since I've known him. And so I was part of that group that did that. And over time, I found myself in a perilous place and increasingly discontent, right? Increasingly discontent with various things going on. I was further entrenched in the internet culture at the time of that, which is kind of before Taylor Marshall got popular and stuff.
Actually, in the chat, one of the guys that goes like, "Who is this guy? I have zero context." So it's been 2 years.
Yeah, it's been a while.
Roughly 3 eternities in internet culture.
Yeah.
So why don't you just tell people a little bit of who you are, what your background is, and I know you're kind of going through that story.
I'm Jeremiah Bannister. I own Paleocrat Diaries. We're putting together a nonprofit called Reaching People Ministries, or RPM, and kind of changed direction. I started on radio and was doing a apologetics program, debated various different groups. I was converted. I was a Protestant pastor prior to that. I converted in 2006, was brought into the church officially in 2007. the time I was on AM/FM radio, got involved in the early days of YouTube. I think early, like 2007. I think. One day after The Amazing Atheist, and I've always joked that it's kind of like hours apart because people have said that I look like that guy, just the more handsome version of him.
Yeah.
I've never talked to him. I threatened before to have
significantly fewer bananas, but
no.
Sorry.
I did. I told the guy, I said, look, I don't even believe you anymore, man. I think that, I'm going to take you to Maury Povich. We're going to find out that DNA thing.
Paleocrat.
Paleocrat. And yes, and
not
it is
paleo crack, Desiree. Anyway,
yeah. No, there's been all different variations. It simply means I coined the term, so I can't fault anybody. It's a mishmash of Latin and Greek, and it's inspired by Jeremiah 6:16, talking about seeing that the old path, the ancient law, and doing that rather than finding yourself out of the way. And so the ministry we've had has always been kind of evangelistic to people, reaching out to as many people as we can. So I did radio. I went to school. I got my degree in journalism and mass comm. Prior to that, I did time at Bonson Theological Seminary for presuppositional apologetics, of which now I'm the poster boy for Catholic presuppositionalism. People can look it up. I'm that guy. But I got to a point in my faith early on where I became really critical of the institutional church, right? The visible church, aka the church, and started getting really critical of that. Increasingly found myself antagonistic toward other people that were otherwise conservative, traditional loving people, but not as radical as I became convinced that it was at the time. And so I found myself going to a Sedevacantist chapel, if you can even call it that, a Sedevacantist worship house. And I was at the CMRI. I taught for the catechism for First Communion. So I did that with the CMRI. I was confirmed for a second time. Right? They insisted it was the first time by Bishop Perunas. And then following that, we left, and I published what to this day would arguably be a series of the best videos on the internet opposing Sedevacantism. And I directed those toward the Diamond Brothers, who they can't stand who I am. They don't even deal with it anymore. And so I've made a number of videos. It's remarkable because they're in my thumbnails. They look like real dorks. Right? I'm like, guys, come on, I'm bringing you on.
Yeah.
And they won't bite. It's kind of crazy. So dealt with that. And since then, I have advanced not only my work on the meaning of Catholic with Timothy Flanders, who's now, of course, the editor at 1 Peter 5, and he's also one of the head honchos over there at Pelican Plus. I haven't really gone to see it, so I don't know much about it, to be frank.
I think they're live right now, too.
Are they live right now?
Yeah, probably.
Yeah. So, he's over there with those guys. He's one of the publishers over there, I believe. And I also worked for a brief time with Michael Lofton at Reason and Theology. So I was there for a time.
I think that's where I first saw you, actually.
People can find my videos either at Meaning of Catholic or Reason and Theology, or I haven't used my YouTube in forever, but and that will be something that we reactivate in the coming weeks and months as we begin rolling out the ministry and stuff. So anyway,
okay,
that's me.
So that's Jeremiah.
That is me.
So okay, all right. So now I'm gonna take off my real hat and now start doing my best I guess impression of a charitable SSPX apologist. So basically, okay, obviously it doesn't take much perception to see that there are problems in the church right now. One might say that it's a state of emergency. There's a crisis that's going on. Arguably, it's worse than it was back in the 80s. So if there was ever a time for a state of emergency to consecrate new bishops on an emergency basis, it's definitely right now. We have, prelates in the church that are seemingly actively working against the deposit of faith. And it seems that in order to preserve the faith, you need to be able to boldly act in a way that preserves tradition, that preserves the apostolic faith, and it kind of doesn't matter though if those in Rome tell you no, because
you have a mega-based argument.
Well, not even that. I would say that like the faith is bigger than any pope. The faith is bigger than any specific cardinal. And it doesn't matter. These guys can't change the faith. And if they're trying to change the faith, then you should just ignore them. And you should just act in a way that preserves that, whether they like it or not. Once again, if I'm getting this wrong, correct me in the comments, please.
Yeah, and that you have kind of a extraordinary situation, right? Supplied jurisdiction to do the fancy things you do. But everything you just said could be said by all the other separated brethren throughout of history, the whole time. In fact, I've made the argument that an Arian could do that and say, well, look, I wanted to worship like my grandpappy. I'm watching as all of these people are going around. They're talking about the divinity of Jesus and this triune thing happening. But that's totally against the faith that I grew up with. And so it's incumbent upon me, regardless of if there's a pope that declared it, that's kind of where we are with this. And regardless of whether or not a council were in fact to do anything, because, well, that's kind of where we are with this.
Sure.
Right? Like it's literally, and it's all based upon their own private determination. And I say that as different from a personal interpretation. People could find themselves not understanding a particular doctrine or how a development is done, but there's a proper way in dealing with that. And for theologians, it would be for them to take a period of time of thoughtful reflection, something that Dr. K and those guys, they don't even give a minute. They just go onto blogs and post right away the same day. So I don't know if you could say prayerfully consider different things when you're just lashing out every day. And then there's proper channels by which that would be dealt with. And this is at the time, Cardinal Ratzinger, right, explaining this and saying, look, these theologians, they understand this. And one of the things they are not allowed to do, in fact, would be to kind of try to put an almost political styled pressure on the Holy See. In fact, that's just blatantly against right? The idea of how the church is to work. And so, but they end up doing it anyway. So they're playing the same kind of game, saying, well, if we manipulate it this way, they're going to change and they're going to be like us and we're going to go back and we're going to eradicate Vatican II. I mean, I don't know the way that they could salvage that or eradicate the Novus Ordo.
I'd like to push back on the point of putting pressure on Rome. How is that different than monarchs in Christendom doing moves to put pressure on the Holy See? How is that? How is it any different than that? Which we know, throughout history, that happened.
Yes, you've got my buddy Tim Flanders. He has this kind of interesting idea regarding the two-sword doctrine, right? So you would have the ecclesial and you'd have the political,
sure,
and you have this exchange going back and forth. And I asked him, I said, well, who are the royals you're talking about? Who are these monarchs? Where are they? And if I've got Tim wrong, he knows how to get a hold of me. But it was that nowadays, kind of masters of mass communication are that. And I said, but that's not, you're not landed. You're not part of an aristocracy. You literally applied for the job. It's a little bit different than how this monarchical systems work. In fact, it's very individualistic compared to that. And even then, I would say there has to come a point at some point where the state is going to have to give way, because the Lord never says, if you have a dispute, right? If you two brothers, you have a dispute, you bring forth your 2 or 3 witnesses and everything else, and then you go over to the monarchs in order to get their final say. That's just fake and phony. Like there's nowhere. In the end, you have to take it to the church, and the church is visible. It's one. It's indefectible, immutable, infallible, and it has a certain procedure that's in fact transcendental. It's the impossibility of the contrary with Matthew 18, because to put together a model that is anything other what the Lord has said like bringing in I know the church said this, but I'm holding to the real faith, or they're not going to judge us as heretics because I can judge them, that sort of a thing. You're just a heretic. I mean, just flat out. And it's because our Lord says, go to that place, go to these people, and whatsoever their verdict is, if you do not accept that, you are a heathen and a tax collector, or be treated like a heathen and a publican. And right after that, he says, for this is why I said to you that whatsoever you bind and loose on earth is bound and loose in heaven. And he's tying it right back. And the reason that's so significant is because what that demonstrates is, for one, we're Catholics, so that is a historical event. We're not deriving that from Scripture. It's a historical event. But the reason is because for that passage to work and not devolve into the ecclesiastical theological relativity problem, the church itself would have absolute authority over the definition of the church. Any argument about the church is the final decider. There's no other place to go. The Lord definitely did not tell us to go anywhere else. And if we were not supposed to go to them, or if there's a bunch of heretic apostates in the new church and all that stuff, the Antichrist, blah, blah, blah. If that's the case, then Jesus is not the Lamb of God, period. And that's a shocking claim that's made by St. Francis de Sales, because he would say either the Lord was ignorant and didn't realize that this would befall us, which many of them say. They'll say, there's no way we could have possibly known, as if the Holy Ghost doesn't guide us. So he either doesn't know, he doesn't care, or he wishes for us to be rotten, dirty, rotten scoundrels. So in one way or another, they're going to have to fall on that sword. And so that makes it transcendental. It makes it that the impossibility of the contrary is the only way to deal with that passage. And the SSPX can't do it. The CMRI can't do it. SSPV can't do it. The Home Aloners, the Johnny Brown, you folks.
Sure. Well, I do want to make it like a quick distinction of like, nobody's saying that the SSPX is a sedevacantist. So CMRI, Most Holy Family, Trailer Park, like all those guys are completely unrelated to this discussion.
You keep going though. Right?
Yeah. So I just want to make that clear. Like nobody here is accusing the SSPX of being at least formally sedevacantist. But I guess it's that state of crisis of after Vatican II, especially with documents such as Dignitatis Humanae, it seemed that there was a fundamental shift in what the church was teaching about, religious freedom and ecumenism and on all these topics here. And then that's not even talking about the liturgical changes. So, I guess I wish we had Dr. Richard Decloux here because he's phenomenal at this. But, it seemed like there was some funny business going on, and we can see that some funny business did, in fact, happen to the church. Millions lost their faith over this change. I mean, this is actually me even taking off the pretend hat for a minute. I can't tell you how many people that I've heard that use the I went to Catholic school. There's like an entire generation. If somebody's like over the age of like 50 and they hit you with a I went to Catholic school, the next thing that's going to come out of their face is going to be the most nonsensical, ignorant BS that you've ever heard in your life. So like it seemed like, especially after Vatican II, we dropped the ball super hard, and that Archbishop Lefebvre and the SSPX seemed to be the only people that were trying to pick up that ball and continue to run with it. This guy was like the best, one of the best missionaries that ever stepped foot on the continent of Africa. So like, I guess a little bit, I would say in this theoretical conversation, thank God that it was somebody as saintly as Archbishop Lefebvre that decided to pick up this mission and saw it to its end for the rest of his life.
Tertullian and Origen in some ways felt similar. In fact, Tertullian, One of the great, I don't know anybody who would not cite both of those individuals as some of the most important apologists in the early formative years of the church. And yet we recognize that regardless of how brilliant they were and the information and the way that they helped, that justified what they did, particularly Tertullian. And he would have a claim. The Montanus, he would say, look, his argument, in fact, was this. He said, look, we come from a tradition where you have these kind of ecstatic things. You have these more charismatic gifts, and that they are visible, that they're evident to people around them. And that these things were being essentially taken away by individuals who maybe, could look back and say that's a kind of cessationist argument. And the same thing could be said, for example, the Donatists. The Donatists, part of that whole controversy was what to do with those individuals who had turned over the ancient scrolls, right? So you have soldiers come in, they say, look, you give me those ancient scrolls or we are going to kill you. And many of them said, I would never do that. They get killed, they take the scrolls and they bolt. Others would say, here, I don't want to die. In some cases, people would say, we don't have a canon yet. I don't even know if all of these scrolls are in fact scriptural. But no matter what, there was a policy in place that in order to preserve the role, right, and the dignity, in fact, of the martyr, that if you were someone who was just a blatant apostate in that place, right, that you'd have to go through some kind of pretty hardcore repentance, right? Compared to now. You want to talk about hardcore repentance back then. And so the church had to make a verdict and said, look, we are not going to do this and require this of these people anymore. You can come on in, and including people who would become rulers in the church. And you say, so they changed. If you had somebody who you had friends who died, you had a wife who died or a husband who died, and then other people that you know and that you see in the church who are still able to function in ministry, them buggers, man, they didn't want to die. They completely turned over all the scrolls. And now the church is going to say, look, we're going to be merciful and we're going to allow those folks to come back in and not go through all that stuff. That is a huge change, gigantic. And you go, yeah, because you're now ruled by people who at the time would have been guilty of apostasy, just blatant. And so again, we see every single group that defects from the visible church, every single one. Including Quietists, Jansenists, you go down the line. All of them are essentially saying the exact same thing as Lefebvre. And it's part of what I call a cycle of enthusiasm. Monsignor Ronald Knox in the book Enthusiasm essentially has locked me in at this point, right? I'm not budging from the Holy See, not even an inch, is that there's a kind of cycle where at first it's otherwise good people trying to do otherwise good things in the best way they can. Over time, that becomes not just kind of like, this is more about my spirituality, but it's that group over there is doing wrong. I'm not going to commune anymore with that group. Even if it's a pope, I still, in principle alone, I will not commune with them. From that point, you have this back and forth, which is lamentable, right? It's worthy of lamentation because the visible church is not perfect in its way that it treats back and forth, right? And sometimes it's like they antagonize one another in such a way that they're supercharging kind of this clown car towards schism instead of just having a stroll calmly where they have time and the kind of disposition where they could draw those people, as many as they can, back out of the clown car. But that clown car goes so fast at some point that division happens, whether it's formal, whether it's the people who said, I no longer identify with those people. I'll no longer participate in what they do, including the Pope. I don't need to listen to what he's saying. That you, at that point, kind of start having issues with the visible church versus the invisible church. We're the tiny flock of the end times. It turns into eschatological, strange pessimism, which is weird because they're all Christ the King people. That's like a dramatic conflict of social theory, which is weird. It's contradictory. And then they get to a point where at some point the leaders kind of divide themselves up because why should we listen to this guy instead of this guy? It's where we get the SSPV It's where we get the CMRI. It's where we get all these different groups, the Diamond Brothers. And once they reach that place, there's 2 steps left. One is you have people who arise who try to unite the clans, right? Tim, bless his heart, that's kind of his mission, right? Him and Michael Matt. I think Michael Matt names his annual convention. It was like 6 or 7 years, I thought 6 or 7, where he named it Unite the Clans, right? It was this thing, this big powerful thing.
Sure.
And I said, yeah, it's happening every year because you can't. Why would you unite to that group over there if you don't even unite with Rome? Why would you do that? Under what authority? Well, because they're right. Well, then we're just kind of a rationalistic thing. And so that's how it works out. So I say, look, he can say that. He can believe he's preserving that tradition. Old Catholics do. There's all different groups throughout history that have said the exact same thing, oftentimes for reasons that are as good to them at that time as they are for people at this time.
I think your wife is in the chat and said that our latency is off a bit. So
no.
Yeah. Oh, hey, the Canterbury Catholic said, oh boy, I was hoping for a conversation like this. Yeah. I remember you were at the Catholic Creator Conference. So now that you're in the chat, I really, so I'm trying to argue for the SSPX side, and I'm not going to pretend like I'm going to be good at it. So if you catch me doing it wrong, like post it in the chat. Also, sorry for anybody who's watching on X. My laptop is way over there and I can't read your chat. So I'm so sorry. I've only got my YouTube chats up. I'll maybe try to circle back to those later on in the conversation. Okay. So, geez, there was a lot there. Okay. Let's
start with the changes of Grandpappy's religion. This is not the same as mine, and I grew up with this. So basically, the Arian set of a contest.
Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, Arianism was, the Arians did that, but they were trying to depart from the faith so much to where they were denying the divinity of Christ. So, I mean, that's not even ecumenical. That's interreligious. That's to deny the divinity of Christ or to deny the Trinity. That puts you in such a category that is that's tantamount to apostasy there. So, and I don't think that anybody's calling the SSPX apostates. Schismatic is the strongest term that I've seen used, but it seems that even Rome is hesitant to use that term in actual enforceable language. You'll have offhand remarks, but no, we declare this as an official schism or something like that.
Because they're trying to meet them. They're doing a shepherdly thing.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. I'm trying to figure out a solid argument for, I'm trying to figure out, and maybe you can help me steelman this a little bit.
Yeah.
July 1st rolls around. They decide to consecrate more bishops against the express will of Pope Leo. I'm trying to figure out a way to say that, how do we say that this is actually an okay thing without falling into the church has fallen, if that makes sense.
Necessity. They'll say, that it's necessary. I had the misfortune of listening a little bit to Kennedy Hall today, but I heard just enough that talking about, these bishops, they're not young or they're not as old, right? You're not struggling with cancer in the same way. So they are younger, but you never know. And so we're going to go ahead and move forward. And the reality is they don't even feel like they need the Pope in the first place to say it. They can say, well, we want to go, because that's what they did. They said they wanted to have kind of this good faith, goodwill discussion to kind of explain to him the nature of why they're wanting to do what they want to do. But the reality of that is just like it was. And to use Kennedy again, I mopped the floor with a guy in a debate about this issue on Meaning of Catholic. That's my own takeaway. People can watch it themselves. And he was talking about, the Pope gave these faculties. He granted these faculties, and he's telling people who are not with the SSPX, look, it's okay to come now. And when the cameras were off, I said, be honest, does the SSPX believe that it wasn't until they were granted that they were able to do that and to do it licitly? He laughed. Of course not. Of course, we were doing that the whole time.
Right.
And the reason is because on what basis do they need to submit to anything that Rome does from here out?
Yeah.
Based on what?
Yeah, no, and that is something that I think a lot of people miss in that conversation, is that without the faculties that Pope Francis granted in 2015 and then extended in 2016, the confessions and the marriages were not only illicit, but they were also invalid, which is a pretty serious deal. I've at least heard at least one story of couple was married in the SSPX. They had like 5 kids or something like that, and then hit rocky part of the relationship. They go to a priest in regular standing with the church, and for marriage counseling, and in it comes up that they were married in the SSPX, and the priest goes, "Oh, well, so your marriage actually isn't valid, and so what that means is that you're probably actually lacking some of the graces that are necessary in order to hold you together. So I think we need to work towards convalidation, so we can regularize your marriage, etc." And but the husband said, "Hold on, did you just say that our marriage was invalid?" Yes, your marriage is definitely invalid if you were married in the SSPX. And he just got up and walked out.
Of course. Yeah. And people can have their take on that, I guess. But I would say if it wasn't invalid, if it wasn't illicit, then why were they all excited about, at least publicly, when talking to people who aren't part of the society and don't go to society masses? Why were they using that as an evidence, right?
Right.
To say, no, we can now, guys. And you're like, all right. Yeah. So you go over there and you're like, well, were you guys married here? Oh yeah, big time. We've been married here for a long time. Well, I thought you weren't allowed. Yeah, we've been doing it the whole time. Right. That is what this is.
Right.
And you say, and you mentioned earlier how they're not separated brethren, or not separated, they're not schismatic, they're not sedevacantists. I've used what I think is a gentle phrase, that they have Martin Lutheritis, and that they it's true, they have Martin Lutheritis, man. They have enthusiasm in their veins and worms in their brains. And it's one of those until I, with my understanding of the ultimate authoritative texts for Luther, that would be just the scripture alone. For a Catholic, it would be scripture plus, right? Mm-hmm. You would have other documents. That unless my personal interpretation of those things and my conscience, that I can't in good conscience do this. And it has to do in part with the strange activities of priests, and the councils have contradicted and the popes have contradicted. And until that's that case, here I stand, so help me God. And I'm like, right. Bro, you're literally, you're right there with, oh boy. And so I think it's kindly to say cryptosedes. And I say that because they do have one thing, and I would grant this one thing, and that is that they accept the missal of 1962. They accept the missal of Pope St. John the 23rd.
Right.
So that's the missal that everybody sees published around and everything. They have the prettiest versions, no doubt. I mean, they're really, at least their missal, I think their missal is pretty sleek. And I like the cover, and of course their logo.
Sorry, this
is
the smug smile of an Institute of Christ the King.
Yeah.
So it's like, yeah, okay, they're okay.
But this leads to questions, and people should go. And of course, this will get society folks a little bit in a bunch. But to say, go and listen to Father Cicada's, I think it was called Sour Grapes, if I remember right, maybe. Mm-hmm. And he's talking about Archbishop Lefebvre, and when a bunch of these Sede dudes were inside of the seminary, right? They were priests and everything. And then they were told kind of back and forth at times, you can believe this, you can't believe this. They have quotes from him. And of course, I mean, the very day when he did consecrations, every day he's talking about how the church was in eclipse, and it's this possibly seat of the Antichrist. I mean, that's just blatantly blasphemous. And so if it's the seat of the Antichrist, the idea that a pope is sitting in that, like a legit pope. I mean, that is a grotesque, monstrous claim that the bride of Christ would have a demon head. I mean, that's just so crazy when our Lord has died for her with his blood.
Right.
And so, but the idea being that in practice, what is the real difference? If the popes say these are people who are included in as saints, do they feel compelled in any way to refer to that person as a saint? Many of them, they don't. Do they need to abide by the disciplines of Rome? Do they need to abide by the way that doctrine is declared and disseminated and understood? Do they need to even accept a council? Like, what do they have to accept? And they go, well, not basically, we're kind of frozen in time here, guys. Right? We're back here in this place. We believe that the new church is caused this terrible thing to happen. And so why, of course, would we, unless it matches with our understanding and our conscience, if in that case, maybe. But look, I'm open to some of them saying, oh no, we've actually done this and this and this that are entirely in line with Rome. And we did so because we were compelled by the authority of the Pope and of the Holy See. I'd love to hear that.
Yeah. Okay. So, oh man, where to go from here? And without me getting too far out of my depth, because the last thing I want to take this conversation to is like a matter of canon law.
Right.
I think that the opinions of like uneducated laymen, whenever it comes to canon law, are the most worthless things on the planet. And my opinions on canon law are not worth anything, and nobody should listen to me. Anyway.
I would never use that anyway. I would never use that as a line of argumentation, if for no other reason than it would just be, I have this evidence and my understanding of this. And if you look at this canon and you look at that canon, and you go, man, the simple folks, dude, where do they have to go? Maybe they got to go check Michael Matt today in the fake, catacomb or whatever.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this is shifting gears and away from the SSPX into the Sedevacantists. That's one of my biggest complaints about Sedevacantism and a lot of forms of Protestantism, because it's like, it seems that you can only arrive here after you've done like almost a PhD level work of research. And by the time you get there, you've completely left the beggar behind. Yeah. The beggar could never, ever in a million years arrive to this conclusion. And Jesus came for the beggar first.
Yeah.
I mean, yes, he obviously came to save the rich man too, but like the warnings to the rich man were a lot more, stark, a lot more severe than it was to the poor. So, if you've left the poor behind, you're not in Christianity. So for a lot of Sedevacantists that say like, oh, if you watch the 6-hour Peter Diamond brother, it's just, I don't care. I don't have time for that. I have 5 children. I do not have time to watch 6 hours, to spend most of my day hearing the ramblings of a man in a trailer park. Sorry. Yeah, I did a video on Sedevacantism once, and the only thing that has changed between it, by the way, it was a bad video, was not good at all. Never even came close to coming to a compelling point. Basically, it was just, I don't take them seriously, and that's not compelling. But I will say that my thoughts have changed since publishing that video, and it's that I respect Sedevacantism even less now.
Yeah, even less.
It's I don't even. Like, you guys need to convince me that it's a serious position to hold before we even start having a serious conversation.
Like
the
nuance that they aim for, again, I think Kennedy Hall is just like a wigwam of really bad ideas, but they are reflective of.
I do not endorse that. I do not endorse that statement. Let me just throw that out there.
He used an example. Of, we're not selling something different. You guys are selling coffee. We're selling coffee. Why aren't we just all glad that we're all selling coffee? And I said, because you're telling everybody that the coffee over there might be poisoned on purpose by like the most authoritative people in the coffee land, right? And you're saying, I don't know if you should go over there. It might be poison and kill you, because that over there, that's not the real coffee shop. The real coffee shop is here. We're holding fast. Like, I'm like, bro, that's not both groups being cool. It's just not. And that's why I say it's not goodwill, man. It's not goodwill. And if people have to themselves understand the jot and the tittle, then how in the world are you going to make that simple act of faith that says these and all the other truths that the Catholic Church teaches, that we believe those things? And you go, that's kind of weird, because there's only a handful of things mentioned prior to that. And then immediately it says these and, everything else and stuff. And they don't go all the way up to this point. And then we went through an interval where they were teaching heretical things. And I got to say, and this is important, is that how do we get out of this predicament? For the society, and I have it on good authority, maybe I'm wrong. I'm willing to admit I'm wrong. I did it before, in fact. I did. You can go
do it every day.
It said Paleocrat apologizes to the SSPX, ? Go look it up. But the idea that if you go and you're kind of talking with New Church, right, and you're talking to maybe the seat of the Antichrist, and you're kind of doing that back and forth, trying to pressure them, what would be the bare minimum required? Would they have to say, guys, Vatican II is a bunch of bunk? Like, would you need to say, well, just this one and that one? Would you need to do that? What about all the encyclicals that have ever been produced in light of, like every other council, those encyclicals and the documents and the disciplines and the policies, et cetera, all of these things? How are you going to overcome that? And a lot of times people kind of fall into this kind of hyper spiritualistic idea that maybe is going to be, the saints coming down. Maybe we're in the end times. Maybe it's just the end and this is the way it's going to go down, which of course Christ the King advocates. They're like shining brass on a sinking ship then. That's kind of really ridiculous. And especially when they're trying to get everybody else to do it too. Titanic's going down, like, you better shine that stuff. Like, what? And so instead of just keeping your lamp burning. But the other one that is just as outrageous, take Eric Ibarra, right? An otherwise nice guy. I've talked to him a number of times.
I met him in person. He's a great guy.
Yeah. And so I would love to meet him in person. But I made a claim on Facebook that the apologetic that I use, and I used, inevitable, inescapable, invincible. And of course, people are going to go, "Oh, how dare you? You're going to need to unpack that, fine sir." Mm-hmm. And I said, I'm just using words that were employed by St. Francis de Sales when using the same method I'm using against you. So he reached out to me privately and we talked, and he said, tell me what your view is of the church, of can it be guilty of error? What kinds of error? Can it be a heretic and all that? And I went through piece by piece, and he said, yeah, he said, that's the predominant Catholic opinion, not just now, but for a very, very, very long time. But he is not going to deny what he is seeing. And in other words, I've seen too much, brother. I've seen an awful lot. I can't deny what my eyes have seen, what I've heard. And, I kind of sit there and I said, well, how do you get out of that? And he told me it didn't matter, that we don't need to deal with that right now. And I thought, that's exactly, if you don't deal with that, it's because you can't. Let's be real. Mm-hmm. Because let's say that him and Flanders and Dr. K and Salmons and any others that people want to, Kennedy Hall, blah, blah, blah. Let's say you get all those dudes together. And let's say that they commit to this wild 25-year project where they're going to go and they're going to study all the documents, man. And after that 25 years of great prayer and fasting and everything else, they call a meeting at the Hotel 6 and they let the news people know, be here. We've got a news conference, something huge, man. And they get there and they go, look, here's the conclusion we came to. Whoop-de-doo, good for you. Number one, who's going to care? Who's going to care? And why would anybody go, look, man, I got to follow those guys? Why? Why do we have to follow any of them? If they don't have to follow the Pope and they can just bash all day long the visible church, on what grounds? Even if they employed this wild, very intense tactic and had access to all the ancient scrolls with their monocles, whoop-de-doo, good for you. And so Eric cannot escape it. He cannot show other than maybe some miracle. Because let's say even if the church tweaks, let's say Pope Leo, he tweaks this and that, and he's making really mega based arguments on a bunch of stuff. But let's say that he believes in baptism of blood and baptism of desire. Well, you just lost a ton of sedevacantists. They'd say he's still guilty of heresy.
Sure.
And so on what level or amount, let's say Dr. K came out and told everybody that is enough, guys. That's the bare minimum, and we've reached it. Why do we have to accept what he says? If his argument is, if you see these things and you cannot in good conscience accept those things, that you are in fact able to withhold your support, and more than that, you're able to do things that are totally contrary, that could get you kicked out, and that will, if you do that, it's going to earn you a lot of lemon drops and lollipops from, media and people who will support you, canceled priest tours and all that jazz.
Yeah, well, I guess I won't comment on what like specific people believe, because I know that's often a moving target. People's ideas develop over time, and at the end of the day, these folks aren't here to defend themselves. So I'm not going to comment on.
I'd love to debate them if they would be willing.
Sure.
In public, I'd love. We're in Steubenville. I'd love to do it.
Yeah. So, I'm not going to finance it, but hey, I'd be happy to host.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah. So I'm not going to comment on any of that. But so, and who knows? Maybe you did accurately represent them. I genuinely do not know. I kind of want to shift the conversation over to present day. So we all know about the consecrations back in 1988. 4 bishops were consecrated, 2 of whom are alive today. And what are your hopes for what happens between now and July 1st?
I would hope that they would be able somehow privately to reach the same place that they did before, where rumor has it a document was available, in fact, to be signed by both parties. However, and I have it on good authority, I have it from one of the, at the time, one of the editors over at the Angelus. He was in my house. We were talking about it. And he said, I said, why didn't that go down? Like, what happened with that? And he said that in the end, there was a serious question. There's a dubia. Like, we got a question. Help us understand this. And what it was, let's say that we disagree over the document we're about to sign. Who has the final say over the interpretation of the document? The Holy See, duh. The Pope, duh. Now, where else would you go? An arbiter? Right? Is that where we've gotten to? Is between the Pope and the society is an arbiter? Well, why is that guy the ultimate authority?
Yeah.
Again, we're back to this question. But they left. I would hope that they'd come back to that table in humility, which they did not do. And they would come back with good faith and goodwill, which they did not do after that. In fact, they would repent. I think that they would do the same exact thing. And as King David, that even cutting the hem of the garment was something that he lamented as a dreadful thing, because what he did unto him, he did unto the Lord.
Yeah.
And he repented of this thing. And he really ticked off at what he killed him, right? People who said, you should have taken him all the way, that sort of thing, and say, this is actually what the great popes, Pope St. Gregory the Great, that he puts in his pastoral letter. I believe it's like book 3, section 4, something like that. And it's he uses David and that very story as an example for how people who are not part of the hierarchy, how they should deal with a bishop that's as bad as the one described above. Because right above that is this bishop that he would be guilty of as many sins as all the people that he's affected with the bad things he's done. and that his stench is risen to heaven. I mean, we're not talking like a little bit bad, really, really bad. And even in that case, even in that situation, you are not, in fact, to use and slay with your tongue. You are not to go and do that, but instead to return back into yourself and, like David, offer up a cowbell. And the reason why is for the reason that, and it would be worth actually saying it, that it's shameful that he says it's worthwhile talking about the blame that Francis de Sales, talking about the blame. And right here, he said, I beseech you, let us look in ourselves for the cause of our vices and sins. And this is in his section on, he's talking about scandal. And he says, in ourselves for the cause of our vices and sins. Our will is the only source of them. Our mother Eve, indeed, tried to throw the blame on the serpent, and her husband to throw it on her, but the excuse was not valid. They would have done better to say the honest Baccavi, as David did, whose sin was immediately forgiven. I have said all of this, gentlemen, to make known to you whence comes this great dissension of wills in matters of religion, which we see among those who in their mouths make profession of Christianity. This is the principal and sovereign scandal of the world, and by comparison with the others, it alone deserves the name scandal. And so he doesn't even admit for a nanosecond that the church is to blame for this. He immediately points to people, because it's infinitely more likely that it's us than the church which Christ instituted as the pillar and ground of faith, of truth, right? And that in her are the wisdom and the knowledge and the treasures of all these things. And that it's the bride that our Savior bled and died for, experienced the worst suffering in the universe for that. And the idea that she would be guilty of these things, even as he said, I'll never leave you nor forsake you. I'll be with you even unto the end, leading her feet and guiding her in the way. So he would be a dreadful husband if he allowed that to happen.
I'll push back on that a little bit. Are you suggesting that church leadership has not made any mistakes?
No. In fact, it's funny. I don't want to go through and try to fumble around to find this, but in his method, in fact, no, I'm going to, because I'm using the same method as Francis de Sales. That's just a fact. So he says, I have no other aim than to make you see, gentlemen, that this Susanna is wrongfully accused, and that she is justified in lamenting over all those who have turned aside from her commandments. In the words of her spouse, they have hated me without cause. This I will do in two ways: by certain general reasons, and number two, by particular examples which I will bring forward of the principal difficulties by way of illustration. For each one proposed a particular path to follow. In other words, there's all these different arguments, and he's going to bring them all back to the very, very, very beginning. And I wish I had page 8, and I don't, where it talks about how, grab it, where it talks about how that the Protestants will realize and catch on very quickly that he has no desire, or he's not going to admit even the slightest degree to answer like, oh yeah, they're guilty of this or they're guilty of that, because his argument boils down to this. And his argument ultimately boils down to the transcendental argument of Matthew 18, which is why he says it's inescapable. They are unable to overcome this thing, and it's invincible, right? And so he doesn't play around with all of that, because in that case, we're right back to the monocle and saying, well, I've read the ancient scrolls with this, or I've read the ancient scrolls with that. And you can admit, due to the visibility of the church, that there are sheep and goats inside it. But that the teaching that the church would do on faith and morals, even on per Vatican I, on matters of discipline and things like that, that those things would lead someone into tremendous sin and land them, maybe they could be saints. I don't know. It's horse crap. I think I'm being nice compared to what he describes these guys as saying.
Yeah. Now, one thing that I guess I would like to see happen whenever it comes to Vatican II, I would like to see a syllabus of errors published, because there are lots of false ways to interpret Vatican II. clearly. I'd like to see that happen, because I think that would clarify a lot of confusion, and basically just have like an official list of like, yeah, well, here's what it doesn't say. I'd like to see that happen. I don't see that happening during this pontificate, or probably even the next one.
Probably ever. They would say,
yeah,
to us is the interpretation, the understanding. I read before we even started this. I read to you a quote that has to do with to the church in the way that it understands it, even if we don't see it, even if we don't recognize like where this thing's from, that it is to her that is given these things. And our job is not to come against it. We're not to say that's wrong about the church's documents. We're not to say, because they even have the power, not just of saying them, but the power of interpreting and applying them. And again, we're right back to the church having ultimate authority, even on passages that have to do with the church and everything that the church says, period. And so if that's true, then the way the church has applied it, how long has it been? How long has it been? Quite some time.
Yeah.
And people say, well, I still haven't seen it. Again, we're at this place where you can see it in application and giving a fair shake. And this is where it's unfair on that side, which both sides are unfair sometimes, right? But on that side where it can be unfair, where they treat it like, well, I have to go to the society because, there's no reverend, masses around me and stuff. I've asked all those people, like, let's say you're an hour away. I said, so did you find all of the diocesan churches within that parameter, right? Did you find all of them and go to, well, oh, no way. I'm like, you actually have a responsibility to. You can't just say, well, I'm bolting and going over to that group. Where do you get that? Where do you get that? And then to malign all of those places and treat it like it's a clown mask, to treat it like, oh yeah, man, the Novus Ordo is just a bunch of this stuff. And then to bring up some of the most wild things that, if we're honest about it, the Diamonds have had a hard time for a long time making any new videos showing like grotesque visible abuses and stuff.
Yeah.
Because they keep having to show the Mountain Dew mass and the nacho chip mass and the cheesehead mass. And dude, these in many ways were generational, not entirely. We have was it bubble mass or whatever it was the boomer church. I don't mean to throw boomers entirely under the bus, but I mean, come on. You look in that place, you see the wildness of what's going on, the roller skate stuff. And you go, a lot of those folks, just truth be told, man, those guys were, really into like Three's a Company and stuff, like their childhood was watching Mayberry. Right. So that generation of person and what they went through and the willingness to like change things, those people, so many of them are going away. And I don't want to glorify the idea that they're going. I think that we need to have a better relationship with those who actually stayed during this terrible time, because they stayed in the church, and they're not all Susan from parish council.
Right.
And so I think that,
yeah, all of Susan's children are atheists, but but the I don't know if I want to address some of the comments. We've got some anonymous troll in here trying to say that Vatican II is a different religion, and quite quite frankly, I have like zero patience for that.
And that's funny, because that's St. Francis de Sales also had zero patience for it, because to make that claim was itself the greatest blasphemy that someone could say. And I just say, you're a blasphemer.
Daniel Brown has an interesting comment here, and we could dwell on this for a little bit. He said, SSPX is caught in a quandary. Damned if you do, or damned if you don't, damned if you do. And I'd be, yeah. So that is, I think, an interesting comment, because the deal that Pope Benedict presented to them back in the day, as I understand it, was you can basically have everything that you want. You'll become a personal prelature, similar to like Opus Dei. But you just have to acknowledge that Vatican II can be interpreted in light of tradition,
Yep.
and that the Novus Ordo is invalid, or
Is
valid.
Yep.
And from what I understand, that deal was refused. Now,
Yeah.
I think that's a rumor at best, but I mean, that being said, like, do you think if the leadership as today, if they did take that deal, how many of their faithful would actually come over with them and not join like the SSPX resistance?
It would be a pretty wild split, and the society people would have a better answer for this because they follow all of the schism that begot from their own schism. So where you have different groups that go, the resistance, and you got this group and the SSPB. So you got all of these different groups that kind of bounce off, and you say, well, I mean, eventually you guys are going to die from like 1 million paper cuts with this thing. And so I would defer that to them to say, if you made that decision and you went back and you went with Rome and you said, look, we're going to do what the diocesan Latin masses do, where so many bishops will say, you get up and you basically describe your allegiance to the church.
Yeah.
That you're not a schismatic group of people. You're not enthusiasts here. And that would be required. How many of their people, they would say it's a betrayal of Lefebvre. And that's, I mean, it makes sense because he said it's the seed of the Antichrist, man.
Right.
He quoted condemned apparitions, the later apparitions, quote unquote, right, of Our Lady of La Salette. I mean, come on, man. You would think that the scholarship might be a little better for such a big stand, but that is something that people from that point forward, they moved on with and they've accepted, kind of like the idea that the smoke of Satan has entered in, and that was maybe the Novus Ordo, and that was the Vatican II. And you say, no, in fact, we've known for over a decade now, since it was published by his secretary of Pope St. Paul VI, that the actual notes, it's not a period about that, where there should be light and all that. There's a semicolon, and it says science, period. And you go, yeah, go back and read what it is that he's complaining about and how he has to stand as the vicar against all of these attacks coming in. He's not blaming trads about that. He's blaming people who've got this idea, this atheistic, materialistic, naturalistic concept, and how they're treating everything in the universe. That's going to be the source of so much liberalism for people, where they begin doubting the veracity of the church's claims. And he dealt with that even on things like birth control. If you look back and see, who was he mainly dealing with? And so, but they go wrong about that. They go wrong about Our Lady of La Salette. And yet that helps to form what their beliefs are that will dictate what their actions are, were the society to acquiesce, sign the document, and move forward.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the best tweets that I saw today is from Michael Brendan Doherty.
I know who that is.
I've never met. I first encountered him for the first time today. So, but I thought he had one of the best takes on this that I've read so far. And he's like, I see two irresolvable problems for Rome and the SSPX. One, the Vatican's bodies for dialogue with the SSPX have all been manifest failures, basically insisting on ambiguity and imprecision in order to achieve the appearance of agreement. This totally offends and radicalizes the SSPX leadership. Two, the SSPX remain committed to the idea that any modern pope can simply end the crisis as they see it with a series of papal fiats and thunderbolts. This is a fantasy.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the best takes I've read so far, of like, somebody's going to have to bend the knee, and Rome doesn't do that.
Never. It never, ever, ever will. Because name the group that was like doing that. It's on the outside, and they're saying the church violated the real tradition. We're the ones that are holding the real faith and the real truth, and the real traditions, and say, dude, if any of those groups in history ever started saying that the church might be Antichrist, maybe it's a different religion. It's not their place to judge me or excommunicate me, but our place to judge them. Dude, they're so far into the thicket of schism that how do you get out of that? To me, the church will always have to accept this much, that things were said they were unkind of those people.
Yeah.
Some of the decisions, like in Traditionis, I would say some of those were tremendously unkind. On the other hand, you have traditionalists. I mean, go back to Cameron O'Hearn's. I love the guy. I want to like meet him and just chill with the guy for a little bit. But the idea in the first Mass of the Ages, there was this insinuation that Rome, they say this about the traditionalist community and everything, but man, we're like, we're trying to love. We're just kind people, and we're just trying to love the Lord. And he doesn't know me. Of course, the Pope doesn't know you. There's over 1 billion Catholics in the world.
Right.
So what is the best way to accurately see your superorganism called traditionalism?
Right.
The best way, and we live in a time where this is how it works.
Yeah.
You have to see buying power and what people are watching.
Mm-hmm.
Because those are analytics that people would be able to see. And you say, in the traditionalist world, who are the big movers and shakers? How many people are supporting that group? How many of them can we safely estimate are truly Catholic and that purchase their books or become members and all of that? And then say, well, what are they talking about? And you say, well, maybe he tuned in when Dr. Taylor Marshall said that, if you suspect that the Pope is guilty of heresy, you don't need to submit. That's the suspicionista.
Right.
Or that ipso facto. And in that case, again, I would say you can say that it's ipso facto that the earliest popes were guilty of heresy, and you don't need a council to do it because nobody's above him to judge him. And so you just have to say, I suspect that those are in fact guilty of heresy. And there's no limit on how long a dubia is able to stand out.
Right.
So do you have to submit in the meantime, or do you not have to submit? Are you able to resist in light of dubias that are either asked a long time ago or ones that are asked like in recent times? These would be questions to be considered.
Yeah. There's one problem that I have seen in the traditionalist circles, and it's very lamentable because I went to an Institute of Christ the King oratory for a number of years prior to moving to Steubenville. Still love them dearly. I honestly, without them, I would not be as on fire for my faith as I am today. But that the best and most saintly people that you will meet in those communities, you will never hear from online publicly. They live a life of silence and prayer, and to this day, the holiest people that I have ever met have been within a Latin Mass community. And one of the things is like, oh, did you see this thing online? It's like, oh, I don't really spend any time online.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, that's why you're going to get to heaven faster than me. That's why you're not going to spend 10 million years in purgatory like me, because you actually are living the faith in a way that's not online. Meanwhile, when all your visibility is online, you get there's this dude with a purple thing, whatever. I'm not even going to say his name. It like comes in here, oh, Vatican II religion, and it's just like, bro, you come in here with an anonymous username, no profile picture. You're not even using your real name, and it's just like, okay, clearly you don't even believe this stuff's strong enough to put your name behind it. So, like,
I publicly do.
Yeah, I do too.
Yeah, I put my name with all the stuff I say.
So it's just like, okay, you're not even doing this. Why should I even take you seriously? Also, you come in here misrepresenting, you're misrepresenting what I believe, and everything about you says you should be pushed to the fringes and no time should be spent on you, because I don't have time to deal with every single anonymous troll fairly and charitably and blah, blah, blah. There's just simply not enough hours in the day. And this is some no-name nobody in
Rando
Joe in Ohio, going through this.
Yeah.
And it's just like, if I don't have time for this, how much less time does a bishop have?
I don't think anybody has time for that. I think, well, and so I'm a media guy, right? So I'm a journalist. I got my degree in mass comm, minor in political science, but mass communication is my thing. And I've studied internet addiction and digital addiction for a really long time. I made videos, and we're going to be publishing those in packages and stuff like that, talking about media ecology, digital minimalism. How do you treat it genuinely as a tool? Does the content really matter as much as the fact that people walking around with something in front of their face all the time has changed the nature of everything, like, and interactions of all places? But
hold on, I need to mock this guy real quick. He's over here saying that's a bad excuse to not talk about issues. What do you think we're doing right now, you clown? So anyway, all right.
And so that was a nice thunderbolt right there, bro.
Yeah,
a Son of Thunder thing. I like that. So,
in fact, you know what? No, I'm done with you. Get out of my chat.
Yeah, get out of here, man.
Almost put him.
Get out of here, bro.
Yeah.
You're out of here, Jack.
Anyway,
so
sorry.
My point is, so like, and I hate using these names, man, but this does make sense because I admire him on this. Flanders, Tim Flanders, he said a couple things. For one, he has this idea of an internet promise that you don't say things against people that are uncharitable. That's kind of hard when he himself calls the Pope a dictator. And when, people on the board with him call my family Judas and Antichrist and all that, apostates, all that stuff. And you say, so that's a little bit weird. I got a little bit chastised because I made a comment. It was something that happened, and Kennedy had a really quick take on it. It was in Dom's chat, right? So Logos Project, shout out to that guy. I love that guy. And
where has he been?
I don't know. I was supposed to reach out to him this week though, so maybe I'll surprise him, right? But I'm watching the interview, and something comes up, and he quotes Kennedy about how he had this response, and I said something like the fact that Kennedy Hall had something disparaging to say about the church and the popes is about as predictable as my morning bowel movement. I got in trouble. It is quite funny because Tim responded. He's like, "Hey, man, I saw that," because Dom quoted. He pulled it up on the screen, and then he read it, and he goes, "Maybe I should have put that there."
Love that guy.
And so Tim reached out and he said, "That's not right." And I said, "Dude, you don't know my bowel movement schedule." And he's like, "No, you shouldn't say this about people." And I said, "Okay, fair enough. I'll do better." So he has an internet promise that he at least tries to deal with, except for people that are with him. So, but then he has another one during Lent where he says most people, the holy people, trads, he kind of makes a broad statement that they're not online during Lent or during Advent, that they're mourning and they're in this place. And he's just literally, there's no evidence of this. I don't know where that statistic that is available to him, where that comes from. And the third one is he was right when Pelican Plus was launched. I don't know how long after, but he had a post at 1 Peter 5 that had to do with like the Antichrist nature, right, of the internet, in fact. But in it, he's talking about all of these things that are totally Antichrist. And then he says, but that's why we have to be on there to kind of evangelize it. But then he talks about how negative it is and how it affects people, but we need to rise above. And it's schizophrenic. I said that model is schizophrenic. But people who are online all the time and they make that their jam, they're, in all honesty, man, they've probably been addicted for a long time. They're dopamine sick, and they would struggle. All these reasons to make excuses to be on there more. And when you're on there, so many people, whether they're individuals who wake up and they're craving the juice, craving that bloody meat, or whether you're one of the influencers that rely on the trending topics, which are all bloody meat. You never have a trending topic that's like some dude on some street in some state going, "Yep, he's being interviewed, and yep, nobody stole anything in my house today." Really interesting. Dude, nobody cares, bro. But if you say, "Bro, somebody came to my house, stole it at gunpoint, and then lit my doghouse on fire," right? All this stuff, man, you're going to have the news all over it. It'll be in the trending stuff. People are going to talk about it because they are in an arena, an environment wherein that is what sells. That is what makes money. And so you go, having level-headed discussion that involves humility, that involves just placing yourself under an authority and that accepts that in all likelihood, you've got a lot more splaining to do than the authority has splaining to do. That's a tough thing, man, when every day you're jazzed out of your mind on some internet stuff.
Yeah.
And so,
yeah. So I guess just to sum all that up, go touch some grass.
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of hard to do that right now. It's covered in snow, but
and when it's available, go ahead and purchase the DVD and CD. It is. I'm dead serious, man.
Yeah.
We'll have it available as an MP3 and MP4. I hate the shameless plug, obviously.
No. Please. I'm all about self-promotion.
They will be including a number of series and videos that I've done related to this exact topic. So I'll have a series on sedevacantism. I'll have a series on enthusiasm. I'll have a series on the SSPX, even debates that I've had with people over this stuff. And that stuff is going to be made available. And we'll announce the launch. We're kind of divided over which.com we're going to go with. So we got a couple different things in mind, but it's already being edited. It's already being put together. And hopefully in the near future, we'll sit down with the Nelsons and work with them in order to be distributed through Nelson's Gifts.
All right. Wesley's comment here has me cracking up. He says, what does Pelican Plus have to do with bowel movements? I wasn't really paying attention.
It wasn't Pelican Plus.
Okay. All right. But anyway,
yeah.
We do need to wrap up soon because it's after 8 o'clock.
That's a pretty good one.
Yeah. So I guess one thing that I will say is that I have a tremendous amount of respect for at least one man who is he does go to SSPX chapels, and that's Jeff Kassman. He's also got some medical issues that's got going on right now. Jeff has gone way out of his way to help me. So I want to make sure that like I'm very clearly, my intention is not to disparage those who go to SSPX chapels because they have found an easier path to holiness there, or perhaps even the only path to holiness that's available to them. I don't want to disparage those people.
I give that to Kennedy Hall too.
Yeah.
How that happened was through COVID and the lockdowns and how the dioceses and structures were dealing with.
Yeah. Like
that's a legit, it's
100%. Like that I don't fault anybody for that. But like the issues that I have are principled and not they're not personal. And also like honestly, some of the with Jeff Kassman in mind, I have every hope in the world that the situation with the SSPX will eventually be solved. They will, whatever irregular status that they're in, will become regularized. I'd love to see them become that personal prelature, which basically means they get to keep their bishops and stuff like that. Right now, I think Opus Dei is the only personal prelature in the church. But I'd love to see that happen because prior to Vatican II, Archbishop Lefebvre was, he was the man, dude. Yeah. Like I said, I was not joking whenever I said this is one of the greatest missionaries that had ever stepped foot in Africa. His fingerprints are still all over Africa. Which like to this day, for to his great credit. So like
people who want to see his influence even with Africa, if they've got a record player like I do, they could go and find the vinyl of Missa Luba, which is the Mass in Latin. The songs, many of the different songs that are sung by people in Africa. And it's very good. In fact, Flanders has the same thing. He was surprised to see that I did. I'm like, of course I do, bro.
Yeah.
And so, but his impact, his influence, I don't think he's a moderate like a lot of them do. I don't know how he would be necessarily saintly because Origen and Tertullian made turns that were pretty bad too.
Sure.
That really had a big effect on the unity of the church. But at the same time, my hope would be that he is at least rendered the due in a good charitable fashion that he warrants.
Yeah.
And it's not as if there's none. In fact, there's enough that it would make a lot of people who are against him a little uncomfortable. They'd be like, well, I have to recognize him for that. And I'd say, dude, honestly, in charity, yes.
Yeah, I mean, like he got a seat at the Second Vatican Council for a reason.
He signed the documents too.
Yeah.
With the exception, wasn't there a note with one of them? Anyhow, yeah.
Okay. Anyway, yeah. I didn't know about the note, but yeah. So it's just like I hope the situation as it is, as a layman on the other side of the planet from all the superiors who are, I think they're all in Europe, right? So, like on the other side of the ocean, somebody who has zero power over this, the only thing that I can offer is my prayers. I hope a solution comes here that makes everybody angry.
No, it makes sense.
I mean,
you're right.
Honestly,
Yeah,
for the SSPX to become regularized, it's going to upset everybody. But I think it's just what it's going to take. It's like nobody's going to come into this and going like, wow, why didn't we think of this 30 years ago? That's not going to happen. So
because truth and faith and charity tend to kind of they're crucified between two thieves, right? And I think sometimes the far on both sides. And if anything else, I do want to say this about the church: for all criticisms that could be leveled, I think that it's in the tradition, in fact, of St. Francis de Sales when saying, who are you trying to reach? How far are you willing to go? How many people can we bring in? Is it only the big fish, or are we desirous even of the little fish too? Where you don't need to have the internet to find out something, or you could be in any country at all and just simply believing what the Catholic Church teaches. And if you're taught, if you read of something, that's the way it is. But I think the church has made it maybe the charity loosening the belt a little too much. And there may be around Monsignor Knox, and there may be a time, and he predicted a time where it would have to tighten again because it was just too much.
Yeah.
And I think that time will come, and we may be on the precipice of it right now.
Yeah. It's we'll see. I don't know. There is one vicar of Christ, and I'm very thankful that I am not him. So everybody wants to play, Monday quarterback with the Pope. But like at the end of the day, like I think that one thing that a lot of people forget is that, what we see here is everything you see on Twitter, everything. I mean, even like what you're watching right now, these are the shadows on the wall of Plato's cave. We are like, you guys, all of us, you and I included, unless we're like actually there and in the thick of it, we are only getting what the people at the campfire are casting shadows for better or worse. Some of them are very honest and very good at doing what they do. Hey, shout out to the Pillar. They do some awesome work. Like if you're looking for a journalistic organization to support, I highly recommend the Pillar. But it's the Pope is always playing a game of 5D chess from the moment he wakes up to the moment he goes to bed. And every single decision that he makes is going to have a ripple effect. So sometimes, and myself included, I'm going to be frustrated that the Pope is like, oh, wow, I wish that he would just, excommunicate them all and just clarify. It's like, well, you know what? That impulse is not a good one. That's the impulse of an ignorant layman. And also the impulse of saying like, well, the Pope should just do away with Vatican II and blah, blah, blah. It's like, well, that's also the impulse of an ignorant layman. Those are two extremes that not going to do anybody good.
Yeah.
And I have a feeling one of those is going to be more destructive than the other, but still, like, they're going to be destructive. And I guess it's just like have some charity, and same with the guys, the leadership of the SSPX. They're playing this same game. So I mean, and all of these men involved, whether that's the priest who's the superior general who has an Italian last name that I'm not going to butcher, or the two surviving SSPX bishops or the cardinals or whatever. All of these men carry the mark of holy orders now and forever, for better or worse, and that mark of holy orders is going to stay on their soul for the rest of eternity. And in heaven, it'll shine brighter, and in hell, it'll burn even hotter.
Yeah. Yeah.
And for that reason, we need to be praying for these men, all of them, because Jesus desires all of them to be in heaven. There is no situation where one side wins and the other side loses. No, we're in this together. And, one side losing is a tragedy for all of us. So,
I want to thank you, man.
Yeah. And thank you all
for having me in here. And you're right. I had to drive far distance, about 7 minutes.
Yeah, 7 minutes. So,
7 to 10 minutes down here to,
this
is a great place. I mean, people don't know this is a serious gig he's got going.
Yeah.
I encourage tons of people to come.
Yeah.
And if they do, man, we wine and dine those folks.
Yeah.
Right. Have a good old time.
Yeah. Yeah. So I guess that's kind of like my closing thought is that I just hope this situation gets resolved in a way that brings the SSPX into a regular status. And because I do believe that missionary spirit of Lefebvre is alive and well in the SSPX. And I think that if the canonical situation could be resolved, they'd be one of the most powerful forces for good.
They would start evangelizing non-Catholics.
Oh my gosh. The Protestants would be complaining about how good we are of evangelizing.
All the time.
Yeah. So
that's pretty shocked by it.
Yeah. I mean, that's my complaint is that Catholics don't do enough evangelism to the,
we're
good. Yeah. We're very good at evangelizing Protestants. Yeah. We're not so good at evangelizing the nuns and the irreligious. Not the NUNs, the NONES.
The nuns.
Yeah. So, but and I think that the SSPX charisms would be a great addition to the beautiful bouquet of the Bride of Christ that we all are. And and it's just like I'm very saddened that some of these things are I don't know, outside looking in, and this isn't one side in particular, this is both sides, that the holdup seems to be not for virtuous reasons. And, the situation does actually make me sad.
Yeah.
And I hope it comes to a resolution. And as far as what should they do? I don't know. And quite frankly, you, dear viewer, don't know either. So just pray. That's all we can do.
And pray for folks like me who are critics. Right?
Yeah.
Because from our side comes very uncharitable things. And at times, even playing around, right, it can be considered that you're just casting aside them as individuals. And I think one of the most daunting tasks, right, for people in my position, especially as a student, as a disciple, in fact, of St. Francis de Sales, is to realize what he did when he first went to the Chablais. And that is, as he was approaching the town that had been Catholic not long before, and it's under de Beza and all this stuff, as he's going on the borderland there, he speaks to, he salutes, in fact, the guardian angel of the city, and he invokes him, and then gets down on his knees, and that's what's on the cover of the book that's commonly the tan version. Mm-hmm. And it's him. I thought it was his brother, maybe, or something. I forget who was with him, a relative. And he dedicated his entire mission to love. He said, love will tear down the walls of Geneva, that these things are not going to be crushed by anger and anything like that. But he was also sharp, and he focused his attention more on those in authority, because their culpability is different than the culpability of a layperson.
Right.
And so he pointed at them and said, "You're leaders. Why do you go after these guys? And if it was the true church, why did they leave it?" Right? Like this sort of a thing. And not say, "Well, they left us." You got your mission through that group. So, at the same time as he was critical, at the same time, he went and he spoke to the average person. They said that he would go, and this got him in trouble. He would go and mix it up with the everyday folks. And he would talk Johnny Q and Sally Sue, right?
Mhm.
And he's trying to get them back in the Catholic pew. And it resulted in him being his life threatened. There was all sorts of stuff. And eventually he had to write down essentially these small letters, and they would pass them underneath doors.
Right.
And that's what would spread them around. And at the end of his life, he said that he would hope that these letters, studies, basically, that these could be used in the future as a method of holy preaching to draw back our separated brethren.
Yeah.
And I say, for such a time as this.
By the way, those pamphlets are now known as the Catholic Controversy.
Yes, everything I've cited from, and I should have said it earlier.
Yeah.
Everything, these are pages, my tan copy's toast. And so I was going through, he can tell you, man, I was going through them, organizing them and stuff. They're scribbled all over.
Yeah.
But that book and Enthusiasm by Ronald Knox, those two are really instrumental. And Ronald Knox, in his book Enthusiasm, is his magnum opus. And in it, he says that he has averted the use at all of exclamation points in an effort to show that he's trying to be fair. He's trying to show the best he can those qualities in the separated brethren that make us lament that they didn't come back.
Yeah.
But also make us hopeful that insofar as that is passed down and you have different people coming, that they would hold fast maybe to the good things and recognize that the rest is only found in the bosom of Holy Mother Church.
Mm-hmm.
And so, Catholic Controversy, Enthusiasm.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, cool. Well,
right.
Jeremiah, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, of course.
I have to walk over there to turn off
it off.
So I'll have to shave it whenever we're done. But
and if people would like to contact me, if they would,
okay.
The website, not so much right now, but the Telegram would be Paleocrat Diaries, and the group, because that would be a channel. That's where we would publish things. The group where people can get involved in the chat and stuff like that is the Wolf Pack chat, all one word. And is Paleocrat Diaries. It's the Wolf of Gubbio for people, right, who might say, "I knew he was the wolf," and say, "Dude, it's in honor of the Wolf of Gubbio." And the one that converted, man, St. Francis of Assisi, you'll see him often with this wolf. And also as a reminder that it's part of the millennial messianic prophecy that says that, contrary to the misconception that the lion will lay down with the lamb, that it is in fact the wolf. And so people should give him a little bit more of a fair shake, right? And that we are redeemed, in fact. And now we howl at the sun and give him glory and exalt his name around the earth. So you can email me at jeremiah@dreambiggerthoughts.com. Again, Jeremiah, JEREMIAH @dreambiggerthoughts.com.